All right, guys. Why am I qualified to talk about this? Okay. So I was involvement officer of SSD like a year ago. So I'm not actually that qualified. I was also president for a short amount of time. Now I work at the US Citizenship and Immigration Services. It's really not a good job, so don't ask me for a referral or something. So on the agenda today, we're going to talk about just an intro to mobile development, uh, native apps, cross-platform apps, and the main part of it is a demo with Expo and React Native. Uh, yeah, so front-end development, there's a pretty big difference between front-end development between the web and mobile, because on web it's mostly standardized because web front ends are always delivered through a browser, and browsers all support HTML, CSS, JavaScript. If you use WebAssembly, it also supports that. But with mobile development, there's a lot of different types of devices. All of them have their own language. All of them use their own frameworks. Uh, so it gets really complicated like that. Um, it's very much dependent on the hardware, on the operating system. Uh, so when we're working with native mobile development, basically like when a company creates a piece of hardware that they want third parties to create software for, then they'll release an SDK, which is a software development kit. So most devices that you use have an SDK, like a Nintendo Switch, like an Oculus Rift, an Apple Watch, your phone. They all have an SDK, and developers probably use it to make apps. So the thing with using the native SDK is that it has the best support for the hardware, and it'll usually run fairly quickly. Um, the the thing is uh like it gives you the most access to hardware features. Like I know Apple is always coming out with like new hardware features like 3D touch, or like the little like pill like on the top of the iPhone 14 and 15, and like I think they came out with like this new API called like nearby interactions. So using the native SDK is going to give you the most hardware features, and um this is mostly stuff that web is not going to give you access to. In recent years, web develop front end web development has gotten more access to stuff like push notifications and stuff like that. But for the most part, if you want to make the best use of hardware, then you would want to use native app development. So pretty big difference between Android and iOS development. In general, Android uses Kotlin and Java. The official language is Kotlin. It used to be Java, but now it's Kotlin. Both use the JVM, Java Virtual Machine. And uh, so Google came out with this thing called Android Studio, which is basically an IDE based off of IntelliJ. Uh, if you took programming one with Java, then you've probably used IntelliJ. It's a really good IDE. Um, so something cool about Android Studio is that uh, you can actually like something to help you with this is that it lets you basically like download an Android phone. Like like I downloaded Android Studio the other day, and this is actually my first time running it. Uh but yeah, I literally just downloaded like a Google Pixel 3a on my computer, and it takes up a lot of space, but there's like other types of phones that you can download. And this is just useful because uh I had like an Android phone back in the day, and it was like a huge piece of crap. So I would always use my PC for development, and that just made things a lot easier. iOS development, I won't get too deep into it because I don't think it's very accessible. Because the thing is you can only make iOS apps on like a Mac, which I don't think a lot of people have. since the computer science department recommends Windows, I think. But basically, iOS development, uh, it used to be made with like Objective C. Uh, Apple now introduced a new language called Swift, which uses the same runtime library, but it's just supposed to be like more modern language. So Swift technically compiles on like Windows and Linux, but you can really only make iOS apps on Mac. Uh, because you need Xcode, and Xcode only runs on Mac. So Xcode is kind of like Apple's version of Android Studio. Like you can run an iOS simulator. So like you can't like it won't give you all of the features of like an iPhone, but on your Mac, but you can load like apps onto it. It's pretty cool. All right, now we're gonna get into cross-platform apps. Here we go, guys. Let me just hide this. So just a little thing with cross-platform apps. It's supposed to solve a lot of the downsides of native app development. All right. So does anyone know any cross-platform frameworks already? Can anyone name one? No. All right. React Native is one. We don't know. Brian? It's called Xamarin, which Ranger is about to explain.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. I'm previous SST president, in case you don't know me. Thank you for having me back. I'm the resident expert on Xamarin, so I'll be doing just a really quick introduction to it. Xamarin uses the .NET framework and C#. And actually, a little known fact is that this is Huell's favorite framework from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Eric. Thank you, guys.
All right. Ranger's always there when I need him. But yeah, I was kind of short, just like Ranger's tenure as president. But yeah, here we go, guys. Flutter. Yeah, Flutter is another one. Flutter is written in Dart, right? Which no one ever uses, so won't get too much into it. Ionic, I think, is based off of Angular. So yeah, we're not going to get too deep into it. React Native is the main part of the presentation. That's what we're going to use. So React Native, it's written in JavaScript and TypeScript. So if you already know React, which I think is kind of common, then there's not much of like the learning curve of going from React to React Native is actually pretty easy. So it's basically like running JavaScript on both. It allows you to run apps written in JavaScript on both your iPhone and your Android. All right, I'm working with like two computers here. Well, yeah, so it can also compile to like a website, which we're not going to go into, but a lot of cross-platform frameworks also used to compile to like Windows Phone, but that hasn't been a thing for like a pretty long time. So won't get into that either. All right. So React Native, it's kind of like it's really the same structure as React. Like there's a DOM, so you write components. I'll just show some code. So I made this app, which I'll actually show off right now. 1 second to connect my iPhone. All right, so I made an app for SSD. It's basically like a little homepage. What is SSD? It has a little details. It has a gallery of some images, some posts, a sign-in form. I have a picture of all of the officers. Let's see. We have our links to our socials. You know, I put some of our recordings on AWS CloudFront for some reason. I just linked them here. And then I have like a calendar of upcoming meetings. Obviously, those aren't real. But yeah, I made this with React Native. And let's just look at like one component, like for the post. So the thing is like even though React Native is a lot like React, it doesn't technically use any traditional HTML tags. It uses tags that you would import from either a UI library or from the node module React Native. And so, for example, view is basically the equivalent of a div. Text, that's the equivalent of like the p tag. So basically, like any. Let's see, I have a little. Yeah, so like in HTML, if you would use img for an image, in React Native, you would use image. An HTML button is also called button, but it's capitalized. But there's a lot of things that don't have an equivalent, like SVGs. I don't, there's not really an easy way to have SVGs in React Native. You can't have that. There isn't an exact equivalent to an A tag, which is just like a link tag. So when I was doing an internship, like one of the tasks that I would often do is like we had like an app and we had like a website, but our app wasn't really done. And so what I had to do is take like some parts of the website and basically just translate it from React to React Native. And a lot of it is easy. It's just like turn the div into a view, turn the img tag into an image tag. But a lot of things just don't have a exact equivalence. Like there's no exact equivalent for CSS URLs. Animations are like overly complicated in React Native. And also not all the CSS is well, like, let me show an example. So React Native doesn't exactly use CSS. It uses JSS, which is, it's basically CSS written in a JSON format. So like, I guess if you're using just traditional CSS, then you would write like margin horizontal, like 30 px. But if you're writing in a JSON form, then you would write, you can't have dashes in the variable name. And you can just write 30 and then it's just understood. It's like px. You don't need to write the px. So it's just CSS written in a slightly different format, but a lot of the CSS doesn't actually work. Like this, like there's one CSS property called display, and there's 3 values that work in React Native: flex, grid, and undefined. So there's basically 2 because one of them is undefined. And in regular HTML and CSS, there's like 26 different values, different possible values for display. So a lot of you kind of have to know how to work with a smaller subset of CSS in React Native. So yeah, it's HTML uses CSS, React Native uses JSS. Oh yeah, and I guess one thing to consider is that even though React Native is technically cross-platform, you can't have 100% confidence that code that works on iOS will compile on Android or vice versa. Like I remember I joined a React Native project and all of the developers were using iOS to test. And I was the only person who owned an Android and the app wouldn't even compile. And so I had to write like many PRs and changes to like get it to even compile on Android. And a lot of that was because of CSS that just wasn't properly written. I guess Java is a more strict language than Swift. Maybe that's the reason. But yeah, there's a lot of things that will cause errors on Android, but not iOS in my experience. So, and even though you might be running the same project on iOS and Android, you might be seeing different UI depending on the platform you're running. Because React Native tends to it tends to make calls to the native SDK, I believe. So if you're using like a picker, then on iOS you might see this thing on the left, and on Android you might see the thing on the right. And it's so if you want kind of the same exact thing showing on both platforms, then you might want to move to like like an opinionated UI library, which there's a lot of. So you would just have to use like a third-party node module. For the most part, a lot of apps try to have the same UI on like both platforms, but you might notice some differences like that. That's like the Instagram page to like make a post. There's like some slight differences. Like this is the really typical like true and false toggle on iOS, but that's not a thing on Android really. And then each platform kind of has its own UI theme, like, and you don't have to follow it. But I think by default it might look uh it might actually look like that. Like iOS has Swift UI, and then Android has something called Material UI 3. And Android will release like frameworks, like you can use there's like a Flutter kit, there's like a web kit. I'm sure there's something for React Native to use Material UI 3. Yeah, so React Native documentation works kind of weird because like basically like instead of showing you like it shows you all this code, but instead of showing you the code like rendering, it'll show you a QR code. And to see what this component actually looks like, you would have to download an app called Expo Go and then scan that QR code, and then it'll build it and then run it, and it'll show you what the component looks like. And building it only takes like a couple seconds, but you do need to download that app ahead of time. So I think it's kind of a cool thing. Like if you make your own app, and you can run it with Expo Go, it's almost like side loading an app on iOS, which is kind of cool. That's a really slow transition. All right. All right. So with React Native, there's a thing like you would create a React Native app. Sorry, you would create a React app with something called like create React app, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's like the typical command that you would use to create a React app. Create React app. To use React Native or an Expo app, then you would use create Expo app. And then there's of course templates that you can use. Like if I want to use TypeScript, then I would use this template that I just found online. And it's just really easy. So let me show you how I'm running our app. Let's see. I have this. Yes, I literally just ran npm start in the command line. And it shows this QR code, which I scan with my phone. And yeah, and then I can see the app. It's really cool like that. But I guess when I started with React Native, I was working with like a pretty slow computer, a slow phone, and slow internet, and so it benefited, yeah, because it benefited me to use a wired connection instead, and uh, but I guess if you don't have like a shitty $50 Android like I did back in the day, then you're fine with using wireless. So there's like a few things to note if you're using when you're working with React Native. So hold on. I guess this is the documentation for the main React Native components. This is all the stuff that comes built in with the node module React Native. Um, so one of the things is safe area view, which you kind of need to, like basically every page needs a safe area view because by default, all of the content in a page will start rendering in like the very top left. And your phone might have like a rounded corner or like it might have like a camera or like a pill or whatever. And so the content in the top left would actually be like blocked off. So if you wrap your content in a safe area view, uh, so if you put everything, where is it? Oh yeah, so styled view is literally just a styled safe area view. So I literally have that as like the base of every single screen on the app that I made. So if I didn't have that, then yeah, all of the content would be cut off. And also basically every phone has like a little bar down here to like switch between apps, and that might also block off stuff too. So another thing is like by default, your app is not going to render the status bar. So you would actually have to explicitly put that. You would if you want it to show. So I have it right here, like status bar. And then I pull like a background color because I think like by default, it renders like white and the screen also renders white. So it's like, okay. So I just needed to put like a different color to it. And then another thing to note is I guess by if you're working with web development, by default, if your page has more content than like the height of the screen, then you'll be able to scroll just fine. Like literally just use your mouse. But that's not the case with React Native. Like this is something that honestly you shouldn't have to worry about. But if you want your screen to be able to scroll, then you have to use a scroll view. So basically I made like this custom component called layout. I named it layout and I just made it the base of every screen. So first I put like the safe area view and then the status bar because I want the status bar to show on every screen. And then I have the scroll view because I want every screen to scroll. And I guess like with if you're working with the web, then you would navigate to a different page by specifying the path. Like if you're on google.com and you want to go to Google Images, then you'd probably put like slash images, in the URL. But if you're using a mobile app, then you don't have that like URL bar at the top. Is navigating with mobile apps works a bit differently. So if you look at the React documentation, it doesn't I guess there's no like easy built-in way to like move between screens. It recommends that you use this third-party module called React Navigation. And hold on. So I guess like how my phone. Oh, here we go. Yeah, it is connected. Yeah, so I guess like how mobile navigation works is there's like you click on a screen and then there's like a back button. So it's like when you click on a screen, then you're creating like a stack. Like once I click on a new screen, then there's like a new screen that's added to the stack. Once I go back, then it's removed from the stack. And so it works a bit differently than like how the web works. But I guess let me show that in the code. And screen. Let's see. Yeah, so I guess this is the main. I have like the root of my app is just app.tsx, and there's like I have 4 tabs to it: about, contact, videos, events, and then I just specify the component that I want to render when I click on that tab. Yeah, so I have these tabs down here. Like I click on contact, and then like a new component renders. So each of these screens is like its own component. Yeah, yeah. Anyone has a question, please. Uh, yeah. So if I were to take out one of those tabs, like let's say we don't even want to show like the events, then what's gonna happen? Yeah, just reload. You reload with by by typing R in the command line. Now down here says like new update available downloading. It usually doesn't take too long, but I think it's been kind of slow on like eduroam. But if it does load, then there will only be like 3 tabs at the bottom because I took one of them out. Um, yeah, I don't know why it's not loading. I guess the Wi-Fi is slow. Like usually it's kind of instantaneous, but yeah. So it's like I did leave in videos, and then I go to like, and I guess for like the about tab, like it's only ever gonna show like one screen, which is like the about screen. But for videos, when I click on the videos tab, it'll show like a list of videos, and when I click on one, it'll bring me to like a page just for that video, like a video details screen. And oh, screens dot. Oh, this is an enum. This is an in. Oh wait, no. Yeah, so I have all my screens in like a folder here. And then I probably could have made this more clear, but yeah, I just imported all the screens as screens. Yeah, I definitely could have made that more clear. Right, yes. Uh, does anyone understand the question and can answer that? Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, right. Well, I guess something that's always gonna render is the tab that was on the bottom that for some reason isn't loading. Because well, in every React app, let's see, where is the entry point? Hmm. I mean, when I used Cree Expo app.tsx was like the only component, and I guess that's just where that's where I put uh like this navigation component. That's where I put all of the navigation. Yeah, I don't know if it always has to be named app.tsx, but yeah, like I don't see app being called anywhere else uh in this entire repository. So maybe it is just the fact that app dot yeah. I don't know. I mean every React Native app that I've worked with has had like the entry point be app.tsx. So I don't know if that's convention or I don't know if that's a rule. But if you use the command create expo app, then like the only component that will exist is app.tsx. And yeah, 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 yeah. So if you're using the node module React navigation, then I guess the root would be like navigation container, and then screen is like every possible screen. Like obviously it's not going to render these three screens at once. This is more like uh just to decide which one it looks at based on like which tab was selected. Yeah. Okay. Now there's like a similar navigation library in just regular React, and I use it all the time, but it's just slipping off my mind. Like, do you guys know what I'm talking about? Like some navigation library? Huh? Yeah, React Router DOM. Like this is basically like React Router DOM, but for React Native. The like, have you used React Router DOM, Brian? Yeah, so it's basically like that. Yeah. So I guess like I don't know what the fuck that is. But basically like All right. Anyone have any other questions before I move on? Oh yeah. Redux. I've never used Redux. That's like a backend thing, right? I don't know. I use Axios in this SSD app. It does that kind of okay. Well, I'm using Axios in this because it does connect to like an API that I made just for the app. I yeah, I'll probably post a GitHub link later, but I made like a SSD API. But there's so React Native has been kind of removing a lot of core components. Uh and I guess the main reason for that is so that it can stay slimmer. So they've removed uh like the slider, the picker, the date picker. All of those have been moved into third-party community supported modules. So they're no longer developed by Facebook, the one who created React Native. They're just open source. Um, so I when I work with React Native, I find myself using a lot of third-party modules, and I guess we're kind of told to not use a lot of third-party modules, but I do see that as kind of necessary when you're working with React Native. Like when I made this SSD app, I used a UI library called React Native UI lib. I think it's pretty good, and it does it shows the same UI on both Android and iOS. Like I kind of mentioned before that typically Android and iOS both kind of have like their own unique like date picker. But some UI libraries are more opinionated and they just have like the same UI showing on like both platforms. And that's really fine. And something I did try to implement, but I just didn't get to is implementing like light mode and dark mode. So your phone can like recognize if your phone is set to light mode and dark mode and like set custom CSS for each. So I did kind of start that, but I just didn't like finish it. So like yeah, so for like light mode, then like the screen background would be white, text colored black, and for dark mode it would be like the reverse of that. But just didn't really finish that. Um, so debug mode. I do want to show this off because it's kind of cool. Um, so just like how you can inspect elements with like F12 in the browser, you can kind of inspect element on your phone, not in the same way, but kind of. So you would first do it by shaking your phone. I shook my phone and then like this menu showed up. And there's like show element inspector. So I want to look at the CSS for like the gallery thing. And it's really small. There's it shows CSS up there. And I'm clicking on like the image component. But I can click on like it's really small text. But I'm clicking on like the image component, but there's like it's showing other things in the hierarchy up here. And I can look at the CSS for those things as well if I click on it. Um, there's even like a network tab, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it's kind of small because it's a phone screen. So I guess there's like a better way uh that you can use on your actual computer. So there's like a third-party module called React Native DevTools. Let's see, where did it go? Oh, uh, inspect elements. Where is it? Start React DevTools. and then it opens up the DOM, or that's the right term for it, DOM. And honestly, there's a lot more stuff here than you would expect. Like this app is really not that complicated. Like literally, like why are there like 5 image components in a row? Like look at this, and there's like 5 text components in a row. But yeah, you can look at the styling for each one, and you can even edit it in real time, and it'll show up on your phone. So that's just kind of a cool, neat way to inspect element on your phone. Pretty cool. So it's not like a built-in thing, but oh yeah, I guess you yeah. So like when I hover over something, then yeah, like you can see it selected on my phone. All right, kind of want to speed things up here, but yeah, so you've developed a React Native app, you have it on your phone. How do you share it with other people? Well, putting it on the App Store can be really complicated, and it's definitely not free either. But there is a way to share it with other people using Expo Go, which I previously told you guys about. Um, so I use so Expo has this thing application service which helps you deploy stuff into the cloud. So basically, like when I created my app, I just typed in like EAS in it, and I guess that's kind of similar to like Git in it, or it's similar to like pushing a repository onto GitHub, I should say. And then once I want to like and then if I do like EAS update, then what it'll do is it'll build my project and it'll put it online, and it'll have a build for Android and a build for iOS, and it'll create a QR code for each. And yeah, it's saying I'm not using the correct CLI, but it's not a problem because I already deployed this. So if that did work, kind of lead me to this site that I guess I kind of like to compare to GitHub because it stores like a list of like all the deployments I've ever made for like all of my projects. So like here, um, I have like 4 React Native projects. Yeah, I guess this is the one that I was talking about. Like I have my first deployment, and then I have like an update where I like just added like a couple components. And then there's like a preview for Android. There's so if you scan that with Expo Go, then you guys can actually do it, but I'll probably post these QR codes in like the meetings announcements channel later. Yeah, or I actually do have I did print them out because I know it was kind of like annoying to like uh scan the board. But yeah, just feel free to grab one. I actually have QR codes for like 3 apps that I made. There's like the SSD app. There's like a pirating site for season 5 of Better Call Saul, and then and I have the drink tracker app, which basically helps you track your alcohol consumption. Um, yeah, so I highly recommend downloading Expo Go on your phone just so you can try out other people's projects. It's really cool. It like I said before, it's almost like side loading apps on iOS. Or did someone have a question? Okay. Yeah, so I guess like the next step after that would be to actually deploy to the App Store, which honestly I don't recommend. I guess the command for that is EAS build, just FYI. But I guess like deploying to the App Store is kind of complicated. Like last year, Ranger and I, our senior project was a React Native app, and our sponsor Dobbins actually asked us to like put it on the Google Play Store, I think, didn't he? And I did try, but it's like this super long application with like a million forms. And like, I don't think Google even got back to me. I guess it was like that bad of an app. They just never even got back to me. Uh, and also like it's not free either. If like whether you're trying to put something on both the iOS or the Google Play Store, you need to register to be a developer. For Android, I think it's like $25 for like a lifetime, and for iOS it's like $100 a year. And then to submit an application is free, but like I said, you need to register to be a developer, which is not free. So yeah, I don't know if I would recommend putting something on the App Store, but it would be cool though. And obviously it does have to be accepted as well. And there's a lot of like regulations like oh, if your app has like notifications, then you have to be able to turn them off. Which I guess doesn't sound too hard, but I don't know. Maybe if you just want to show off your app to other people, it can be kind of annoying. Something I do want to point out is that even though Expo and Expo Go make things very easy, it makes it very easy for you to run and test your app locally, and it makes it very easy for other people to look at your app. It's not actually a necessary dependency of React Native. Like in my internship, like I was working on an app, but it did not actually use Expo. Like we would test using Xcode and Android Studio. So you can use like Android Studio for an Android emulator or Xcode for an iOS simulator. I guess there's a difference between like emulator and simulator. Like emulator, like you're literally downloading like all of Android. You're actually running it. And iOS, it's, I guess like I don't know. Like, is there a difference? I don't know if this is even an important point. Emulator and simulator. Okay. All right. Won't get too deep into that then. Yeah. All right. So I do have like other small projects. Oh, did you have a question, Brian? Okay. All right. Sorry. Oh yeah. So I did mention I made this app called Better Watch Saul. It's not legal. It's just for pirating Better Call Saul. I have it on this QR code. Um, I did actually show it off in an interview. I did not get the job, but uh, yeah, Ashurian. Why did Postman open? I did not mean to open Postman, but yeah, I did make an SSD API for the app that I made. Uh, yeah, and then there's the drink tracker, helps you track your alcohol consumption. Be responsible, guys. Don't drink and drive. All right, testing. Um, so testing gets kind of weird with React Native. So there's something called React Native Testing Library, which is inspired by a React testing library. And it's a really strong way to test your apps. Like you can actually tell, uh, you can actually say like, oh, click on this button, and when when that button is clicked, then like a modal should pop up. So like expect that modal to render. Uh, okay, my phone stopped screen sharing. But yeah, I don't know what that other bullet point is. Snakeware testing. I don't know. I don't know. Sorry. Uh, oh yeah, something that's kind of cool, but that I forgot to mention is that there's actually a way to um like there's a cost that comes with React Native because React Native is an abstraction of the native SDK. And so um even though that's very helpful, even though that lets you write apps once and run on both platforms, a cost of that is that you can't use some of the lower level hardware features or like SDK features. So there's actually a way to use like uh native modules. Like you could you could add like a C++ module to your React Native project that actually um lets you use like some lower level feature that only works on Android. So it's like you're creating like this bridge between like React Native and like Objective C or like C++ or Swift or whatever. So it's kind of cool. Yeah, so like React Native doesn't have to be all of JavaScript. You can use like uh modules that are written in like C++, Objective C, because that's just what iOS uses. But I digress. That was kind of off topic. But we're kind of reaching the end here. Oh yeah, I'll just mention this in like 5 seconds. So there's like something called like AWS Device Farm that lets you test like mobile apps using like real mobile phones, but the mobile phones are stored somewhere on like AWS warehouses. And so if you work for like Uber or something, then Uber might have like their own device farm where they just have like this giant container filled with like phones or other uh other mobile companies like I don't know Snapchat might have something like that. They just have all of these different types of phones and they whenever they make an update they test it on all those phones. All right, so what's the point of this? So like the thing is like most internet users are actually like on mobile, which I guess makes sense because if you're on a phone, then I feel like a lot of companies are like actively trying to move you away from the web. Like try using Reddit on the web nowadays. Like they just keep trying to push you onto their app. Um, so yeah, like React Native, uh, it's really easy to learn if you already know React, but I think it's a skill that is in high demand right now. So it's really good to know. And I guess another example of why you might want to use like, even though I've been talking up like cross-platform development, um, I another downside of it is that, like I said, it doesn't make the best use of the SDK. And one example of that is the old Snapchat app on Android. It made really crappy use of uh Android's SDK. Like basically instead of using like the actual camera feed, it would basically use like a screenshot of what is on your screen. And so Android users would always be sending kind of like blurry pictures to their friends. And I think that kind of like single-handedly created like this uh like the negative idea that like Android phones have like really shitty cameras. Uh but yeah, so eventually Snapchat did move to like a native app for Android and it's a lot better. It makes better use of like the SDK. So yeah, just something to consider. All right. Before we close off, any questions? Anything at all? Anything about life? Okay. Right. It's okay. I'm here. I'm here for you, Brian. Oh, that's the entire comment? Okay. I was about to sit down for this. All right. So, and of course, if anyone has any further questions, then you can DM me or Ranger on Discord. But yeah. All right, guys. Just have some further resources that I want to share with you guys before I move on. But yeah. All right. So in on Discord, we have like a channel called Meeting Summaries. I'll post like all the repositories that I use for this meeting. So I have like the Drink Track app, the SSD app, the illegal pirating site, and I made like an SSD API. I'll just post the links to all of that in that channel. And also, all of these repositories are open source, so please feel free to contribute to them. Uh, like, I think like SSD is already working on like a website, right? And I opened a PR, and despite getting 2 approvals, Blake shot it down. So that's literally the reason I made like this SSD mobile app. So like please feel free to contribute to the SSD mobile app and I will not shoot down your PR. All right. So quick survey. What did you guys like or dislike about this presentation? Did you guys learn anything today, even if it wasn't at this meeting? Uh, I would really like that. Brian, okay. Ranger talked about the. Oh, do you want me to go into this? Okay, so this is me in 2005, and that is my dad. He is abusive. Uh, all right. Oh yeah, let me just hold on. Yeah, let me just reconnect my phone. Oh, Brian, was there something in particular that you feel like I could have explained better? Okay. Wow, so I think your criticism was invalid. Not, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But yeah, all right. Yeah, so huh? No, you're Chuck McGill. And so obviously I had like the treasure of SSDB, the treasure of Albuquerque. Oh yeah. What? Okay. Uh, that's not up to date, is it? Jonas, do we have any announcements? Oh, I'm basically done, yeah.
How many software engineers does it take to end a Zoom recording? Oh, okay. It was on.